All right, let's go ahead and get started. Today we are going to be discussing lesson 2-6, which is adding and subtracting with unlike denominators. And our objective today is to add and subtract with fractions that have unlike denominators. All right, so let's take a look at our first slide. Okay, this first slide is an example. It tells us exactly what we're going to do. If you notice, the example that we have here says 1/8 plus 2/7. And it tells us what we need to do is we need to find a common denominator. Now, one way to do this is we could simply multiply the denominators together. Okay, 8 times 7 gives us 56. Okay, when we do that, we know that that's going to be a common denominator. Okay, we know that we have to multiply this 8 right here times 7 to get 56. We have to multiply this 7 right here times 8 to get 56. Okay, now whenever we're dealing with fractions and we're making equivalent fractions, we have to do the exact same thing to the top that we do to the bottom. Okay, so this 1/8, whenever we multiply 8 times 7, 1 times 7, we get a new fraction of 7 over 56. That's the same exact value as 1/8. If we were to simplify that, it'd go to 1/8. Okay, and our 2/7 becomes 16 over 56 because, again, I multiplied the 7 times 8, the 2 times 8, and that's how I get 16 over 56. Then when we add, your denominators stay the same. That's how we get the denominator of 56 here. And we simply add 7 plus 16 to give us 23. And that's our answer because we can't simplify any lower than that. Okay, let's take a look at our next one to see if we could do that. All right, these are the three examples that we're going to do today. 5/14 plus 1/7. Then we're going to have some mixed numbers here on number 2. 8 2/3 minus 1/2. And finally, number 3, we're going to have 3/5 plus negative 2 2/3. There we go with the integers again. Those things never go away, do they? All right, let's take a look at our first example. Now, number 1, again, we notice that we have different denominators. We have 14 over here on this guy, and we have 7 over here on this guy. Now, we could multiply 7 times 14 to get a common denominator. I don't want to do that because I know by looking at these two fractions that both 14 and 7, they go into 14. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite my equation with my equivalent fractions. So I'm going to have to take this 1/7 right here, my 1/7, and I'm going to multiply both the top and the bottom by 2, because again, if my common denominator is going to be 14, okay, I know that I'm going to have to multiply both the top and the bottom times 2. So this is going to be 2 over 14. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this whole equation right here. I'm going to have 5/14 plus, I'm going to use my equivalent fraction right here, the 2/14. Okay, and that's going to give me, let's see, my denominators stay the same, so I know that it's going to be something over 14. I'm going to go ahead and add this. 5 plus 2 is 7. So I get 7 over 14. Now, I'm not done yet because I know that 7 over 14 can simplify, can reduce. I know that 7 goes into both those, so 7 divided by 7 is 1. 14 divided by 7 is 2. So I know it's equivalent to 1/2. And that's all there is to it. It's not terribly difficult, I wouldn't say. All right, let's take a look at our next example. The next one, we have mixed numbers. We have 8 2/3 minus 1/2. Okay, and we could do this a couple of different ways. Okay, we can subtract the whole numbers and then subtract the fractions, or we can do our popcorn method to convert these into improper fractions and then subtract. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to, let's do the popcorn method first. I'll show you that way. remember we have to multiply our denominator times our whole number plus the numerator. Remember we have our multiplication down here, our addition right here, multiplication down here, addition up here. Okay, so if I did 8 times 3, that gives us 24, plus 2 is 26, so this would be 26 over 3 minus 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3, so that would be 3 over 2. Okay, now once I have that, now I can work on my common denominator. On this one, I know that my common denominator is actually going to be 6. Okay, so I'm going to make my equivalent fractions right down here. I'm going to have 26 over 3. I'm going to set that equals 2. And then I'm going to have 3 over 2. And I'm going to set that equals 2. And again, I already said my common denominator was 6 because 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, so next thing I need to figure out is, well, what do I do to this 3 to get it to be 6? Well, I multiply it times 2. I have to do the exact same thing to the top, which that's going to give me, what, 52 over 6? And down here, I know that I multiplied times 3 to get 6, so I have to do the same thing to the top that I did to the bottom. 3 times 3 is 9. Now, I can go ahead and work that problem using my new numbers. So instead of 8 2/3, I'm going to use 52 over 6. So I'm going to have 52 over 6. And I'm going to subtract 9 over 6. And again, I know my denominator is going to be 6 because remember our denominator stays the same. Now, 52 minus 9 is going to give us, what, 43? So I get 43 over 6. Now, I'm not done yet because now I need to simplify this back into a mixed number. So remember, how do we do that? Well, remember, we divide up. Our 43 falls into our division box. So we're going to divide 43 divided by 6. Well, 6 goes into 43, 7 times? Which gives us 42, with a leftover of 1. And remember, I put my remainder over the number that I divided by, so this would be 7 and 1 over 6. And that is my answer. I'll write it a little bit bigger down here so we can see it. 7 and 1 over 6. Not terribly difficult. It looks like a lot of steps, but none of them are really hard. Okay? All right, good. Let's take a look at our next one. All right, our next example says 3/5 plus -2 and 2/3. Dang, negative numbers never go away, do they? Okay, and that's probably going to be the biggest issue that we're going to have on this one. So let's take a look. Again, I'm going to go ahead and do my popcorn method on this one. I'm going to multiply and then add up here. Okay, so 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8, so this is going to become 8 over 3. Actually, -8 over 3, I guess, is what we should say. Okay, now I need to figure out my equivalent fractions for that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do my 3/5 underneath here. And I'm going to set that equal to something. And then I'm going to have my 8/3. And again, I'm going to set that equal to something. All right, now let's take a look at this and figure out what my common denominator is going to be. Well, again, on this one, there's no number smaller than 15 that both of these numbers will go into, 5 and 3. So that means my common denominator has to be 15 for both of these guys. Okay, now I know that 3 times 5 gets me 15. So I have to do 8 times 5 to get my numerator, which is 40. And I know that 5 times 3 gives me 15. So 3 times 3 gives me 9. Okay? So now I'm adding these guys up, but one is negative and one is positive. Okay? So if you remember, whenever we're adding integers or negative numbers, if our signs are different, that means we have to subtract. So I'm going to go ahead and do 40 over 15. I'm going to subtract 9/15 from that. Okay. Now we should remember by now that the denominator stays the same. So my denominator is going to be 15. And now I subtract. 40 minus 9 is going to be 31. Now I need to come back over here and look and see which one of these is bigger. Well, which one is bigger, 40 or 9? Well, obviously 40 is bigger. And if we look, 40 over 15 was actually my negative. Since that one is larger, that means my answer also has to be negative. So I know it's going to be negative 31 over 15. Well, I'm not quite done yet because now I actually need to simplify that. Remember, our fraction falls over, our numerator falls into our doghouse, so we would have 31 divided by 15. So 15 goes into 31 2 times, which gives me 15 times 2 is 30. The leftover of 1. Remember, I put that remainder over the number that I divided by, so that would be 2 and 1 over 15. Now don't forget about our negative sign. So our answer for this one would be negative 2 and 1/15. And that's how you do it, ladies and gentlemen. Again, not terribly difficult. None of this math is hard. It just requires a lot of steps and for you to be careful, because if you don't do each step, or if you forget a negative or something like that, you're going to get it wrong. So be cautious. All right. I think that's the last example that we have. So take your time, do the best you can, and good luck.